Test. Good evening and welcome to the December 7th meeting of the West Sacramento Planning Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter along with requests to speak cards. This is a reminder to everyone that requests to speak cards should be completed and turned in to the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda, but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write the item number on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. We will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Lepore.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we need to take roll? Okay. General administrative functions. Section A, presentations on the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the commission. Please note that the commission is prohibited by law from discussing issues not on the agenda brought to them at this time. Is there anyone who would like to address the commission on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to item B, correspondence and staff communications from the planning secretary. Mr. Tilley.
Yes, thank you, Chair Austin. A few items to note for you. First of all, you should have 3 memos in front of you. One from Mr. Laffey regarding item number 5, and then 2 from Ms. Allen regarding item number 6. They will address those content of those memos in more detail once we get to those items. Recent city council meeting, and an upcoming city council meeting. I think the item of most note for the planning commission is the school project, charter school project that we heard at our last planning commission meeting was appealed to city council, and the council is scheduled to hear that appeal at their meeting next week on the 13th. And so when we next meet, I'll report on the outcome of that appeal. At this time, that concludes staff communications.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. Item C, disclosure of ex parte communications. Planning commissioners should disclose any communications they have had on the agenda at this time, and I will remind my fellow commissioners to indicate who you may have engaged with and what the general content of those conversations were. So I'll start on my left with Commissioner Liebig.
None.
Commissioner Vu.
No communications.
Commissioner Castillo?
None.
And Commissioner Lepore? None. All right, thank you. So seeing none, moving on to consent agenda items. There are 2 items for consideration, and I will entertain a motion to,
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I have a motion from Commissioner Castillo,
Second.
second from Commissioner Vu. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries. Items 1 and 2 pass. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item 3, presentation and discussion of the evaluation of the city's zoning code as part of the zoning modernization project.
Yes, Chair Austin, I'd like to reintroduce our city consultant on this project, Martha Miller, now of Lisa Wise Consulting. She made a presentation regarding this project to the commission a couple of months back. I know some of you were not at that particular meeting, but this is our second workshop with the Planning Commission on this project. And tonight, Martha is principally going to present a review of our current zoning ordinance and potentially some ways, and as we move into the next phase, of how we can improve upon it. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Martha.
Thank you, Commission. It's good to be back. I'm going to start with a short presentation, kind of giving an overview of the project and where we are at this point, and then a summary of the evaluation report, including the recommendations. But want to leave time to hear from you, your reaction to the report, and if there's anything that we missed or anything to add. So I always like to start by reminding, why the city is embarking on this project. And it's really to update the zoning ordinance so that it's consistent with and implements the general plan. The city put a lot of time and resources into articulating what that vision for the future is for the city, and the zoning is one of the key components of implementing that vision. So we want to make sure it does that. It promotes high-quality design. It is clear. It uses modern terms, definition. It recognizes current types of development that happens. It has a clear permitting process, consistent with state and federal law, and overall that it's easy to use and understand by all parties, whether it's staff, applicants, neighbors, the general public, and so on. So we're in the beginning stages of the project. We've been spending time doing research, analysis, and assessment of your current code, looking at what's on the ground now, what the vision is in your general plan, what your zoning says, if the development you're getting is, because of, or in some cases despite the standards that you have in place. And then we'll be going on to a zoning framework, so putting together kind of that structure of how the new zoning will be. And then we're going to start drafting the regulations in parts. And we do that because if we were to, look at 400 pages of regulation at once, it's very overwhelming. And so we'll break it up into pieces. We'll start with district regulations, then move on to special development standards, and then finally administrative provisions. And we'll review those with the public and with your commission. We'll take comments and feedback on all those, revise each one of those, put it all together into one complete draft, and then we look at it again now as a complete set, and we'll look at that with the public, with your commission, make revisions again, and then go through the formal hearing and adoption process. So it's really about listening, building on direction, responding, and kind of going through that process. But we always like to hear as much as we can as early in the process so we can wrap it in. So just in general, the purpose of zoning, I like to think about it as being a good neighbor. On the one hand, you're looking at, working towards that ultimate vision for the future of the community. At the same time, looking at minimizing the potential impacts that one use or development of one property can have on another. So we're trying to fit into the overall scheme of, the city's vision, at the same time recognizing the potential and trying to mitigate potential impacts. So as part of the research and assessment phase, we talked to a number of folks that use your code to get from their perspective what are things that, maybe are particularly good or that we need to pay attention to. We also talked with staff and others, and the input is included in your report. But just to kind of highlight some of the major themes or the common things that we heard from people was that, one, that the city is very well positioned to accommodate forward-thinking development. There was really, across the board, we heard, we are looking to the future, we're forward-thinking, we're progressive, and the city is well-positioned to do that. The level of review for projects is generally appropriate. Things that should go to the Planning Commission typically do. Things that staff maybe should decide on typically are at that level. Permitted uses should be expanded and definitions should be updated. And this really goes along with modernizing the code in how uses are treated and how they're defined. Similar with industrial uses in particular, were pointed out that the industrial zones need to be looked at, the industrial areas, and looking at some less traditional, kind of getting back to that more progressive look at looking at what is industrial today. And it's not pure manufacturing anymore. There's more retail, there's more service type uses with those. Parking requirements can be reduced or given more flexibility. We'll talk a little bit more about parking later, but also that the city should encourage strong design standards, but not be overly prescriptive. It's some of that flexibility that the city has that really allows some good and forward-thinking development come through. So we took what we observed, what we heard, what we thought, and put that into the report and organized it in a couple of topic areas. And I'll go through a quick summary of each of those with some recommendations. And the first is really looking at the zoning districts. So the zoning districts are, what your city is divided into and identifies for each zoning district certain uses and development standards that apply. And those zoning districts implement your general plan designations. And so when the city updated the general plan, there was quite a few land use designations that stayed the same or were similar, but then you had some brand new ones in there. And those include commercial, which is for the locally oriented retail and service, where you could allow some multifamily above the ground floor. The corridor mixed use, so mixed use along your main corridors. This was a little more geared towards non-residential type mixed uses. And then neighborhood mixed use, which is a lower intensity mixed use, meeting the needs primarily of nearby residents. So these are some new types of land uses that weren't really envisioned in your previous general plan, and we need to have the zoning districts to implement those. With that, in looking at the zoning districts, we're also looking at streamlining and see if there's any existing districts that maybe aren't necessary anymore or that we can consolidate. So we'll be looking at cleaning up all of those. The next piece is the development standards, and the importance of quality design in development really can't be understated. It elevates the quality of life, it attracts investment, it's a source of community pride, and particularly as West Sacramento continues to grow and urbanize, it's something to pay attention to. And your current ordinance is really lacking in those physical design standards that relate to building appearance and design compatibility, which is very much in contrast to more of your more recent specific plans that have a lot of more detailed design direction. So there's some kind of balance in the middle there for the zoning ordinance. Your general plan also identifies a number of different character, districts and neighborhoods. And while that's very evident when you move around the city, your zoning treats a lot of those the same. Mm-hmm. So we want to do two things with the development and design standards. One, have new regulations that address building form and site design, so the location of the building on the lot, some facade articulation, orientation, transparency, particularly in those mixed-use areas where you want some interaction with the street. But then it's also tailored to those individual areas. So where you are in a more transit-oriented or pedestrian-oriented area, those standards do concentrate more on bringing the buildings towards the street, the interaction with the pedestrian realm, whereas in your more auto-oriented areas or your industrial areas, you're focusing more on compatibility. So you might have more landscaping buffers or things like that. So we want to include more appropriate standards and then tailor them to the character of the area. The next piece is the land use regulation. And what we used to do in zoning for land use is try to imagine every type of land use imaginable and kind of list all of those out. We tried to be really detailed. And in some cases, we would have bookstore and stationery store and drugstore and all these different things listed, which really are retail uses. So we take a different approach of kind of grouping uses by characteristic, function, product, so that as times change and as new uses come on board, we have that description where these uses can fit into. And we don't always have to say, well, it doesn't specifically say brew pub, and so you cannot do a brew pub. Instead, we describe kind of that character of that use. So that's what we'll be looking for in the use sections. And then, again, going through each of those districts and making sure that those appropriate uses are allowed to support the general plan policies for that. And the next area is on parking and loading. And parking is always a kind of a constant conversation, and it's an important topic. And it's not just because of the impact that parking areas have on the character and the functionality of a community, but it's also because there is no one right answer. It's always a conversation, and there's no one number that anybody can tell you that if you provide these many parking spaces, you'll have enough, but not too much. And then to further complicate that, our mobility system is changing currently, and we don't know exactly how our transportation systems are going to be effective or affected by that. So we don't know what the future is with autonomous vehicles, shared ride services, so on. But we do know a couple things. We know, number one, it's not going to happen overnight. We know that we are going to have to store vehicles to some extent still, and then that we no longer need to rely on the private automobile to get places. So before, we used to have to either live on a transit line or have a car, but now there's more options to fill in that need. So we'll be looking at the parking and loading requirements in light of that. One question we did ask every one of the code users that came forward is, can we get rid of parking requirements? Can we just have developers or property owners provide as many parking spaces as they think they need to serve their use and their customers? And I did not get one taker on that. Everyone did agree that probably reduced parking was appropriate, but not quite ready to subscribe to that further progressive thing that some communities are doing as far as getting rid of minimum parking requirements. The other thing we're paying attention to is areas for passenger loading, which typically zoning codes would usually just have that for loading for docking facilities. So that's the other aspect. Ordinance usability, this was one thing that, people who are familiar with the code, who've used it a lot, have all their sticky notes and their notes of how to navigate it and what things mean. We want to make the code instantly understandable to somebody who picks it up. So really developing a new format and organization, consolidating standards that are related to each other. So there's landscaping, all those landscaping regulations are in one place. Where there's things on parking, that's all in one place. So people don't feel like they need to read every page of the code in order to get that complete story of what applies. Simplifying regulations using tables, illustrations, again, bringing the language up to modern terms, keeping out that legalese that comes into it. Also with development and review and approval, this is one of those that the administrative procedures really set that procedural framework for how things are reviewed. And so first we're going to look to just clarifying the administrative processes for all of for all development, for whatever process you're going through, making sure that it's clear what those steps are. One of the things that we do recommend consideration of adding a new process called a minor use permit process. And that's where the zoning administrator would actually have discretionary review for uses that they're kind of limited in scope and impacts, but there's a potential you might want to add some conditions to it, or you want to notify the neighbors to see if there is any concerns. So this would be a process where there would be public notice. The city could apply conditions to the project, but a public hearing would only be held if somebody requested one. So if the notice went out and there was no reaction to it, people, thought it was fine, didn't request a hearing, then it would be approved. If somebody requested a hearing, then they would have a public hearing on it and go through that process. Oh, and with that, one of, see if I can figure out how to go back. The other piece we really look at is looking at where there are standards particular to certain uses or locations that we can include in the code just as an ordinance requirement. And then we can, in some cases, look at levels of reducing the level of permit required. So for instance, if there's projects that you typically see maybe quite often and you always apply the same condition to it every time you see it, well, we can say, hey, why don't we just codify those conditions, those requirements, and then that project could go through without having to come to the Planning Commission or go to a higher level. So if there's anything that you see regularly like that, that it would be appropriate, we'd like to hear about that. And then, of course, compliance with state and federal law. So there are certain laws that really limit the power that a local jurisdiction has in some respects to land use and development and the regulations. So we're always paying attention to that, and we will let you know if there's, something that's particularly, in there because of state law or federal law. In some cases, it's very explicit what we need to follow, and some examples of that are the accessory dwelling unit laws, water efficiency, landscaping, and then there's others that are a little more subject to interpretation. We think about free speech type things like related to signs, adult businesses, and so on. So this is more kind of a notice about the types of uses and items that are subject to certain state and federal laws, and again, we'll be paying attention to those as we go forward. So that's a quick overview of the evaluation report and the recommendations included in that. And we'd like to hear from you thoughts on what's in there, and then if there's anything in particular that we missed or overlooked.
Great, thank you very much for that presentation. So I'll turn it over for some discussion and comment from my fellow commissioners. I don't have any requests to speak on this item. If you are interested, please fill out a comment card and turn it into the clerk. And I'll start on my right with Commissioner Lepore.
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming back and doing this presentation. I appreciate all of the design and development in particular. You don't always see that. And it's one of my hot points, and actually my house was featured in one of those photos, so appreciate that. That was, really, I just don't have any questions. There's more of comments, and it's a great presentation and very thorough, so thank you.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Castillo.
I don't have any questions, just appreciate the information. It's all new information for me, and it was pretty easy to read and skim through. And I was particularly interested in actually the parking section, because I know parking is a big discussion across the city, even areas where I live over by Capitol Yards. So I was interested in just kind of like the overall vision of the parking that we plan to take on as part of this plan.
Right.
So that was interesting to read. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Vu
No comments, but thank you for the presentation.
Great.
and Commissioner Liebig.
Thank you for your presentation. A couple just general comments. You mentioned that the city is well-positioned for forward-thinking development, and I'd have to disagree. We have been working on this for a while. Our general plan, which has already been approved, is designed to be a forward-thinking document. So, and it sets our policies for moving forward, and then as you get into different policies and zoning, that's where you get into the details. So I actually like how we've set that up, and I do appreciate the work that the city's done to be a forward-thinking community. And I think that's reflected in some of the developments that you actually featured in your packet, showing what we're actually going for. Well, in fact, we are going for that as well. And so I don't have any specific comments about what's in here. Regarding parking, I agree with you. It's a double-edged sword. At this point, I do feel we need to include it in our policies. One reason we would probably not want, the reason we don't want to exclude it is if certain developments or, say, the city chooses to offer parking and others don't, it puts an undue burden on those that do. And I don't think we want to go for that right now. So, although I do totally understand the need to restrict parking in certain places. So, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about some of the things that you've outlined. But I look forward to the process.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a few more questions and comments, so bear with me. So first, stakeholder outreach. So I really loved the comments and the organization of the comments that you got from stakeholders. It seemed to me that a lot of the comments came from current users of our code, which means are people who have, approached the planning department in some capacity, whether, they'd like to develop or have even submitted an application. But I would really encourage us to think more broadly and think about a broader use. So I would love to hear about stakeholder outreach that you have done and intend to do. And what I'd also like to recommend is that in addition to current and immediate past users of our code, I would love to hear from potential applicants, so maybe, kind of a broader group of stakeholders, as well as weighing in from professional organizations and local experts. Two that come to mind because I'm members is the American Planning Association and the Urban Land Institute. And I would also recommend strongly to talk with transportation experts. On one hand, I recognize that some of these transportation changes, on one hand, they don't happen overnight, to use your terms. On the other hand, in the process of developing the arena, we had a complete tidal shift in how people were going to get to the arena that we hadn't anticipated, and that happened relatively quickly. And so I think there are people, again, transportation engineers, people who work in, who are research centers who look into this. So I would love to get their feedback to weigh into the implementation of our work. But yeah, if you want to start with that, tell us about some of the stakeholder outreach, that would be great.
Right. So we absolutely did focus on the code users for this, because that's what we're looking at, evaluating the current code in this one. As far as outreach, so a lot of the study sessions will happen with the Planning Commission, open to the public. And then we also have where we'll be developing materials for staff to reach out to different groups. Right. So go to the chamber meeting or APA or ULI to get them involved in their interest. Zoning is an interesting topic for public outreach because it's not the vision, it's not the big picture, it's really technical in a lot of in a lot of aspects. So for some people, it's just a matter of question, well, what does this mean to my property? What's changing for me? But definitely the groups, they still might have want to be involved in. So we have the website as well, where people can sign up for project updates. Staff is always available. But certainly the groups, you mentioned a couple that have particular knowledge and expertise would be some to reach out to. We also, myself as part of a group and other professionals in our area are looking at the future of mobility, I would say. And have talked with professors at Cal Poly who do study this and working at bringing in all that forward thinking as well as the on the ground, how does it work today, and trying to bring that all together. So, and we'll continue to do that. But
Great, yeah, thank you very much. And yes, I mean, on one hand, this is not one of those things that you're going to have like public afternoon meetings, but I like the idea of staff reaching out to kind of key stakeholder groups. I think that chamber is great. So then along that same point, I think of accessibility to the work that we're doing. So certainly you're talking about the content, but also the interface is going to be really important.
Yes.
And so again, looking at what other cities have done, I've seen some really great. Okay, let me take that back. I haven't seen any really great zoning websites, but some are better than others. And I think that thinking about the interface, I don't need to get too much in this level of detail, but as you're moving forward, I think how it will look to the user and how easy it will be to move from one thing to the next. For example, not just I've already owned this property, I'd like to develop it, but I'm interested in doing this type of development. I want to do some compact development. What's my menu of things? So that just from a user interface, I would love the process to reflect some of that.
And one of the tasks, and I should have mentioned this, is an online interactive zoning ordinance. And when we get further in the process, get closer to that, it's another consultant that's what they do, that's what they're experts at, can come and kind of go through, walk you through what all those different kinds of calculators are, and just not only being able to navigate it online, but also, answer specific questions about development.
Right. Great, thank you. And then my last sort of comment or question, and it's pretty funny because this is pretty out of character for me, but in general, I'd like to create, more certainty and less barriers for good development to happen in our city. But Commissioner Lepore brought this up. I do have some concerns about our design review process, and I would love to give that a little more thought. That may not necessarily be something that we explore in the near term, but whether that's an advisory group rather than a governing group, that's something I would be interested in, whether it's like a group of advisory stakeholders that may be members of some commissions who can elect into advising staff on certain areas. So that's just looking at some additional oversight that doesn't create too many more time constraints for applicants. Another thing is our more high-profile areas, I think, really need to have some greater design review. We have been fortunate to have some really great. I haven't had issues with any of the elevations that I've seen, but I really want to be cognizant of our historical areas, our riverfront, just our key areas. It's really important how things look, and just getting lucky with good architects and good contractors. Like, we can't just rely on luck for some of these really special areas in our city. So I think that there would be some value in giving some really close reading and thought and standards for certain districts, which you allude to, so just kind of affirming that. And just, again, on that same topic, I think that we have some pretty poor quality architecture in our community, and I think a lot of it was a throwback to possibly even stuff that was approved before we had cityhood. But I really want to be thoughtful, and having even industrial areas and suburban areas, we need to be really thoughtful in how our community looks. So I'd like that to be an important part of the process, really looking at our design review.
Okay.
So that's it. Thank you for bearing with all of my questions. I still have no public comment, so any other comments from my fellow commissioners? Seeing none, that's it.
I just want to put the slide up that has the website information,
Great.
just so everybody can access that. A lot of great information, and can sign up for project updates.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving on to item 4. This is a public hearing regarding the proposed conditional use permit for auto sales at 1040 Riverside Parkway, Suite 135. Ms. Allen.
Good evening, Chair Austin and members of the commission. This item is a conditional use permit application for retail auto sales in the BP zone. The applicant is proposing to have an indoor auto showroom and office at the location on Riverside Parkway. The applicant is intending on focusing on primarily the sale of luxury vehicles, and viewing of the vehicles would be by appointment only. Also, no repairs would be held at the facility. We are recommending approval of the project. If you have any further questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and I believe the applicant is here as well.
Great. Does the applicant intend to give a presentation? They're not required to. Okay, I see shaking his head no. Okay, well, I will open the public hearing. And I will actually hear from, I'm opening the public hearing in case there are questions for the applicant. And I'll start with Commissioner Liebig on my left with any questions or comments for staff or the applicant. And also, I have no request to speak, so if you'd like to speak on this item, you can turn in a comment card to the clerk.
Thank you, Ms. Ellen. This project is similar to one that we've already approved and that we have existing. Just wanted to note that with that project, I don't believe we've had any problems. In fact, they've expanded their operation. They appear to be successful, and we've still not had any problems. So there's nothing holding me back really from approving this project.
Thank you for your comments. Commissioner Vu?
No comments or questions?
Commissioner Castillo?
I agree with Commissioner Liebig.
And Commissioner Lepore?
Same.
I agree with the comments provided by Commissioner Liebig, and I'll entertain a motion or additional discussion.
I'll move approval of the recommended action.
Madam Chair, you might want to close the
Oh,
public
thank you.
hearing.
Yes, I'll close the public hearing. And with that,
I'll move approval of the recommended action.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Liebig and a second from Commissioner Lepore. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission this matter to the City Council by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 15 days of tonight's action, and the appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
Thank you very much. We're moving on to item 5, public hearing regarding the proposed Savoy vesting tentative subdivision map at 5130, plan development permit, and Washington specific plan minor deviations at 641 5th Street. Mr. Laffey.
Yes, good evening, Chair Austin and members of the commission. This item is for a residential infill project in the Washington District at 641 5th Street. I'll start off by providing some context of where this site is in the neighborhood. So it's at the corner of 5th and G Street. It's really close to Raleigh Field, about a block and a half to the north. The zoning on the property is waterfront, which is a very high-density mixed-use zoning, and the general plan land use is riverfront mixed use. That allows for 40 to 120 dwelling units per acre. This site is also within the Washington specific plan, and this is in the Washington neighborhood, and then also the Washington Blocks design guidelines. So the block between 5th and 4th Street, and then also 4th and 3rd Street, those two blocks there are within the Washington Blocks design guidelines. So to provide some further context, this is really close to the proposed streetcar, which will hopefully be coming online here around 2021. It's a few blocks away from one of the proposed streetcar stops. So here are some site photos. The first one on the left is at the corner of 5th and G Street. The property is the vacant field right there. As you can see, there are some trees in the rear of the property, and there's also a tree right there at along the sidewalk, more towards the eastern side. So the application requested is for a vesting tentative subdivision map. It's for 22 lots. 19 of them would have single-family homes, and the other 3 would have duplexes. also a planned development permit, and then minor deviations from the Washington-specific plan. The Washington specific plan allows for minor deviations as long as they're compliant, they're in line with the general plan. And these deviations are being requested because the general plan recently, last year, got adopted, and it changed the zoning for this property to riverfront mixed use. So it upped the zoning. And we haven't quite gotten to the point of updating the Washington specific plan. That's coming next year. So we're kind of in this period in between. So these deviations will allow for the type of development envisioned in the general plan to be built. So to go more into the details here, this is the site plan. As you can see, there are 22 lots. The proposed development will be right up against the sidewalk on both sides, along 5th and G Street. There's going to be a paseo in the middle, and then also 2 driveways taking their entrance and exit off of G Street. As well, there's going to be a communal barbecue garden area in the back corner for the residents. So the deviations being requested, they're needed to implement the Washington, or the waterfront zoning on the property, which allows for 40 to 120 dwelling units to the acre. So reduced setbacks. The Washington specific plan currently requires a 10 to 20 foot setback, 10 being the min, 20 being the maximum setback. The deviation request tonight is to allow 0 side setbacks in between the newly created lots, and then also 4.5 feet and 3 feet off of the rear. Also reduce the lot sizes. The Washington specific plan requires 3,500 square foot minimum lot size or larger. This is a project that is a little bit different from when the Washington specific plan was originally created 20 years ago. This will be very small lot, high density. It's kind of like what you might see in the Bridge District by Garden Park. And then also another deviation being requested is for reduced off-street parking. 33 parking stalls would be required off-street if you go by the zoning ordinance, and 22 are provided on-site for this project, so 11 are requested to be provided on-street. The Washington specific plan does allow for on-street parking. That is in the section for this street, for 5th and G Street, so on-street parking is allowed. And then lastly, frontage standards and design, reduced front setbacks and reduction of the landscape strip. So the Washington specific plan has frontage standards by street, and for 5th and G Street, like I said earlier, 10-foot minimum setback up to 20-foot maximum, also requires a 6-foot sidewalk and 6-foot landscape strip. If that were to be implemented today, it would not allow for the high density that is required in the new waterfront zoning on the property. This is half an acre, 40 dwelling units is the minimum, so if they were to have a setback of 10 to 20 feet on both sides with the 6-foot landscape strip and a 6-foot sidewalk, you're really constraining the site and it makes it a lot harder to get that density. Another thing to mention is that this is a transit-oriented development neighborhood. Mentioned that streetcar will be going in there in the next few years. So lastly.
Before you move on to CEQA, would you just mind
yeah.
going back one slide? Could you let us know, I'm curious more from for the implementation of our general plan, if we had, if our planning was caught up with what the general plan that we updated, would we still need some deviations? Does this match what we?
That would be a process when we're going through the Washington specific plan update. We'll be doing outreach and workshops with Planning Commission on what do we want to see in the Washington district. This is a similar project to what's at the B Street project. And there are already some projects like 3rd and C where we have these very small lot single-family homes that they're pretty much attached. So it's a similar product type to what's already existing in the Washington district. The Washington-specific plan doesn't quite align and allow for it, though, unless there are minor deviations.
But just to that point, but it does align with the city's general plan.
This project does, yeah. The general plan has new policies, and the zoning, the general plan land use designations change for many of the properties within the Washington-specific plan area. So we're in a period right now where the Washington-specific plan doesn't quite align with the general plan, and that's, next year, we're going to be updating the Washington-specific plan.
Yeah, thank you.
So for CEQA, requesting tonight that you find the project is exempt under the Government Code Section 65457. This is a statutory exemption for residential infill projects that are consistent with an adopted specific plan. So the Washington specific plan does allow for minor deviations. So if you allow for the minor deviations, it is consistent with the specific plan. And the Washington specific plan did consider the impacts of high-density residential development on this site. It was HRR before, high-density residential. However, that did not allow for nearly the density that the waterfront zone did. The high-density residential was 12 to 25 dwelling units to the acre. Waterfront's 40 to 120. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions, and also the applicant is here and has a presentation as well.
Thank you. I think what we'll do is hold questions from commission if the applicant would like. You're not required to, but if you have a presentation, you can do that now. And I'll go ahead and open the public hearing, because right afterwards, we will have questions and comments from staff, or from commissioners. Opening the public hearing.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm Brian Hanley of Next Generation Capital. I'm one of the developer partners for the Savoy project. Here with me is Catherine Bardis of Bardis Homes, and Donnie Hanley, my brother and partner as well. First of all, I want to thank the city staff, and notably Seamus, David, Justin, and others for helping us through this project in the last year and a half. We believe we've created a high-quality, high-density infill development of for-sale housing that has a modern flair, but also respects the integrity and history of the Washington district. Anyhow, before we take any questions, we want to show you a brief presentation of a project we are nearing completion in the city, the Good Project, and give you the feel of the quality and detail we're going to take forward on the Savoy project as well. Turn to Catherine, slide.
As Brian mentioned, we are almost completed with the Good Project, and we're pretty excited that we were the developers to actually take this project into fruition and have it, well, almost done. It'll be done in March, so we're pretty excited about that, and we kind of wanted to take what we learned from the Good Project and apply it to another site in West Sacramento. So this half-acre parcel that Brian and Donnie found, we thought would be a good implementation of growing the city and growing our footprint in the city as well. With that, I'd like to just show you guys a few photos of the interiors of the Good Project, which we plan on emulating at the Savoy project, as well as some of the exteriors, and walk through what we wanted to change moving forward. So here, just interiors, we pride ourselves on quality finishes, but still having homes obtainably priced. I don't know how to work this. Okay, there we go. So an aerial view on the right side and kind of a park view on the upper left corner. The aerial view still shows the density of the Good Project, but we're trying to achieve a more dense site with the Savoy project, mainly because we're, as Seamus mentioned, we're kind of in a gray area with the general plan and the Washington plan, so we're trying to find a happy medium. Also, the Good Project has 3 feet between buildings, which really is kind of a wasted space. Buyers can't use that and oftentimes complain that it's a dark area. You don't know what you're going to get there at night if you don't have the proper fencing. So we thought maybe just better to do away with that, since it's not usable and it could be a safety hazard. Also, it did that on its own. Also, top left corner, Good Project has a park, which we also wanted to emulate in the Savoy project that you'll see in the plans. Here,
We have one-car garages. This is kind of the alley view. One-car garages, our homes go up to 2,000 square feet, and the one-car garages have not been an issue for buyers, even with a home price as much as $500,000. And I thought that would be important to point out that even though you have multiple people living in each residence, one-car garages are fine. Some of them don't even have cars, which I personally found very interesting. So wanted to just point that out. And this is actually our last slide, just to show kind of the park view of the project. And we look forward to hopefully building out the Savoy project pretty soon, and happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you very much. So you can actually remain seated for a few minutes. We'll have questions when they come up for you from the commissioners, and I'll actually start with Commissioner Lepore.
Thank you. It looks like a great project. It's obviously a big fan of high density and transit-oriented. A couple questions on timing and price range, if you have that.
So I don't know if the applicant would like to address that. They may not say exactly, but
I said range.
yeah.
Depends on the city. Timing-wise, I mean, honestly, ideally, our goal was to finish the Good project and then move our construction team over to Savoy. But because we're just now at this phase and we still have to go to council and do our improvement plans, hopefully next year sometime. Pricing-wise, honestly, I have no idea, just because we've seen significant price cost increases from the building market because of the fires. We're having huge lumber increases, all these crazy things. So I can't really point to what our pricing is going to be, but we'd like to have it be obtainable because we want it to sell quickly.
Is that it? Okay, Commissioner Castillo.
I'm very excited about this project. Thanks for the presentation. Quick question on the traffic. I'm not sure it needs a traffic impact analysis, but was there any traffic impact analysis that was done as part of this project, given that I know 3rd Street is quite a busy street, and 5th Street is also one main street that folks are starting to use quite a bit. And with the new development going in there, I'm just curious to see if there was any traffic analysis that was done, or even if it's at this stage, or...
We had done quite a bit of that work through the Washington Realize project, which had assumed this level of density on this property, given that it was high-rise residential before, and then we knew it was likely moving to waterfront. So we have evaluated that for that entire neighborhood, and some of the improvements that are under construction now are related to that.
Yeah. That's all I have, Chair Austin.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Vu?
Yeah, one question for staff and then one question for the applicant, but a question for the staff first. Is undergrounding of any of the electrical wires needed at all for this project, or is that?
Yeah, Mark Collier in Development Engineering is here, and he can answer that.
Good evening. It was not required as a condition of approval. Our undergrounding ordinance doesn't apply to existing residential neighborhoods. So,
Wait, this is a subdivision, isn't it? So,
we have that discretion, I'd say.
David, pardon for me jumping in here, but isn't that a standard policy for our subdivisions to include undergrounding of overhead power?
It is something that commonly comes up with subdivision maps, and we commonly talk about it here. I think, this is an area where we're looking at this as a district-wide basis over there through some of the infrastructure project, and there even has been an undergrounding district in that neighborhood already. I don't know if this property is included within the bounds of that district offhand or not. But I concur with what our city engineer has to say on that.
Okay. Thank you. Good question.
And question for the applicant. Obviously, we've heard over the last couple of years now how critical the issue of affordable housing is in the state. Are any of these units dedicated for affordable housing?
No, I mean, the inclusion, but we were going to pay the mitigation fee.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Vu. Commissioner Liebig?
Thank you. Actually, I have a few questions, and I'm not sure if they're necessarily addressing, or should be addressed to staff or the applicant. Would you like me to parse them out or just go through them?
Just go through your questions. Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. Seamus, thank you for your presentation on the setbacks regarding the deviations. In the Washington specific plan, you mentioned 10 to 20, but we're going to, I'm sorry, the proposed project is, you threw out some numbers, and actually I had a hard time writing as fast. Along Fifth Street, that's a 0-foot setback?
Along Fifth Street, it's a little bit more than, looks to be about 2 or 3 feet. I'm looking at the tentative map right now. Yeah, it's 0 along G Street, but the buildings are set back a little bit along Fifth Street.
Okay, and then on the back side, it looks like there's a larger setback on, I shouldn't say the back side. Is that third or fourth? Third. Forgive me, it's a big packet with lots of paper, so. And I've lost my, is it parking on the back side? Oh, no, never mind. It's housing. All right.
There are other properties adjacent to it on the east side and on the north side. And a little bigger setback adjacent to those other properties as relative to the street probably would be advisable.
Okay. I'm okay with the parking reduction from 33 to 22, given that there are 22 units and there would be street parking available, noting that we've also included higher density right across the street. So, there will be, didn't we? Yes, we did. A couple meetings ago or last meeting.
Yeah, there was another project.
Different project, right.
Just kitty-cornered from this one a couple meetings back.
Overall, we're going to see an increase in cars probably on the street, at least in the near term, especially as we're in this awkward transition stage, as we're bringing in more transit to the area. I'm a little uncomfortable with the setbacks being so close to Fifth Street, because Fifth Street is such a busy street. It's a 4-lane street. It seems a little odd to have the buildings right up to Fifth Street. I know this is an unfair question for Seamus, but maybe he can get some support. The prior project, there was a project that was previously approved, coincidentally by the same developer as the Good project. Was that a similar project? I actually don't remember.
If I remember correctly, that one, it was similar in the form of this building and the density, but they weren't individual units. It was more of a mid-rise. I think it was like 4 stories. And it had a little bit more, I believe it had a little bit more of a setback, yeah.
And density-wise, density, I didn't mean to do a direct comparison, but density-wise, is this lower, equal, higher? Okay, I apologize. I know that was probably an unfair question.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because when you're talking about 0 setback, there's still a public right-of-way, so it's 0 setback to the public right-of-way. It's not abutting the street. There's still a sidewalk, isn't, I mean, that's what I'm seeing on Fifth
It's 8
Street.
feet,
It's from the sidewalk, right?
8 feet sidewalk though, right?
Yeah, there's an 8-foot sidewalk with 4-foot street tree wells. And this,
Right.
looking at the more, yeah, there's a 1.5 feet between the back of the sidewalk and this project.
Yeah, the back of the edge of the right-of-way. So the Washington plan talks about the 10 feet and 20 feet as being from the setback from the ultimate right-of-way. And so that's sort of providing a range, and so we're getting a little bit closer to where that would be. But it's still, in our minds, consistent with the urban streetscape standards that are in the Washington plan about, reinforcing streets, especially major streets and transit streets, of which, Fifth Street will ultimately include streetcar only about a block or so, 2 blocks north of here.
Right. I do think it's a good project. I want to clarify, make sure they say it's a good project. And I don't want to replace it with something that would be built of lesser quality. I have some hesitation with how this would sit. And I want to make sure that during design review, that the city staff really focus in on looking at the Washington-specific plan and those standards as the plan really focused on the neighborhood character. And when I was going through a lot of those meetings, the neighborhood was really intent on keeping the character of the neighborhood. That said, the Washington area is made up of several different types of housing. So there's not one type of housing that you can model a character after. But I do want to make sure that staff is very, very aware of that plan and try and really fit this into the neighborhood. Because it's a higher density project going in around lower density housing. And you know, I understand we're in a transition time. So, undergrounding, I'm sorry, I actually thought that was a standard put into our engineering. So anytime that we have an opportunity to underground power lines, I think we should be taking it. So I would be in favor of adding a condition to underground overhead power lines along the project.
Would it be all right if I requested a reaction to that from the applicants? What are your thoughts on the undergrounding of utilities? I mean, besides the obvious.
It appears there's one along G Street.
Because I recognize it's not a development cost that you may have entertained, but.
I think you're probably talking about the one that was shown in the photo on Fifth and G.
Just can't recall.
Yeah.
The streetscape, the street view?
Katie, can you pull up the site photos?
It's that,
That's not on
Beautiful.
frontage, though.
The one on the left, yeah.
That's not really, I don't
looks
think
like
that's
it's
on
in
our
a
frontage.
city right away.
Well, they typically are.
Yeah.
They're typically along the sidewalk.
That's right on the border, I don't know.
So,
Said another
I'm
way, do you want to weigh in
pausing.
on some of your
Yeah.
previous developments and what your requirements were, or what you anticipated costs might be as a result, for us to consider it as we deliberate as a condition of approval?
definitely. I'm pausing because I just want to make sure that I approach it in a politically correct manner. Usually for sites of this size, because it's less than an acre and it's about half an acre, there aren't generally a lot of burdens on the developer to handle a lot of public uses or undergroundings of utilities, just because the cost cannot be spread across only 22 homes. Whereas if we have larger projects that exceed 3 acres, I mean, we've gone up to 30 acres at times, definitely, we understand the burden of taking on some of the cost burdens associated with things like these. But because the project is larger and you can spread the cost along more homes, it makes more sense. But for this, it would be extremely burdensome, just because there aren't as many homes, and we're trying to make it as obtainable as possible and really bring for-sale housing to the area.
One thing that we've done in the past, sorry if I'm going to speak for staff a little bit, is to include the requirement, but not as a right now type of a thing, and just as an option. The condition is typically something like, the developer shall underground power lines at the time that the rest of the street is done. So kind of shared effort.
Yeah, while we would appreciate the delayed payment of having to do that, the cost is still there. So it doesn't get rid of having to spread the cost across those homes. We could consider, I mean, honestly, we really wouldn't want to do that, but we could consider some sort of cost share agreement with the city as well, because it would be a benefit to the area, not just our property.
I actually don't have purview to make that kind of a,
I don't either.
an agreement.
Is there undergrounding going on within the infrastructure on?
As I recall, that was part of the overall package, and that went out to bid in this bidding climate, some of those costs came back to be much higher than expected. As I recall, we may have pulled that out of this phase of that infrastructure project. That's what I'm recalling being told by our Public Works group out there. And this particular pole at the corner there is challenged because it does appear to be sort of in the way of where a sidewalk and curb return would ultimately be. So we'd like the ability to work this out during the design phase about what exactly to do with this particular pole, if anything, because eyeballing it does appear to be in a not good location. And looking at the plans, there doesn't look like there's a lot of other places to actually put it, should it actually be in the way of the future sidewalk and curb return. But we would appreciate a little bit of latitude during the design phase if this were the commission's direction. We'll look at this more in depth with the developer and their design team.
Has there been a minimum threshold in terms of when we would require underground? I mean, in
Well-
terms of the number of units, right? Their number of units is what, 22?
Yeah, the thing about undergrounding is that it sort of sets off a bit of a domino effect sometimes, whereas, you take down this pole,
Right.
and then it goes all the way across the street, and sometimes you ended up taking up one pole, but you could end up putting up another one, somewhere else. Or in some cases, we've had it where we've underground across the frontage, they might take down two poles in the middle, but then they end up putting, two poles at the edges of their property because the rest of the poles are still up on that block. So this is a real challenge to do sort of project one lot at a time rather than doing it more comprehensively, where you can actually make sure you can get enough of a reduction in the number of poles to really make it, worthwhile. Going from 3 poles to 2 poles that we've had in some cases has sometimes been thought of as really not worth it if you're talking about only getting rid of one net pole.
I think, thanks for the clarification. I'd be comfortable with having staff kind of work that out with a developer and figure out a way to help minimize that impact it would have in that neighborhood.
I'm tripping up on how that would sound, or how we would put that in, because this isn't really necessarily a design element, and I think moving the pole is going to be just as difficult.
So, as Ms. Bardas mentioned, during the improvement plan phase would be what I meant by design in terms of addressing how we would deal with this pole once we get to the much more detailed plans.
And you're talking about the city's plan for the Washington district.
Well, ours, but also working with them on their improvement plans, that will be, the next phase of the project for them.
And can you clarify what the next phase?
Well, typically a project like this, they would, now go into more detailed utility plans, grading plans, to ultimately do their site work, grading, things like that, and then ultimately proceed to vertical construction, sort of the normal course for most of these kind of most residential projects. So you have preliminary plans, in front of you. Those will become much more detailed through the improvement plan phase, and their engineering team working with our engineering team. And, that's an opportunity to, really get to the bottom of what to do with this pole.
Yeah, I do understand. This is one pole. And it's just on the corner of G and Fifth, and right next to a brand-new development of several homes. And there's 22 homes. So it, I think, clearly falls within the subdivision category. David, if you could maybe help work on some language to help.
Yes, we're working on that in the meantime, in anticipation, if that's part of your ultimate motion.
And I will stop making comments. Thanks.
Do you have any additional comments about the infill exemption for CEQA? Are you fine with CEQA?
I was fine with CEQA.
All right, well, I also agree that this is also a good project, no pun intended. And I'm excited to continue to see infill in the Washington neighborhood. So I don't know if I need to give staff another minute. I can just fill airspace, that's fine. But what I will do is close the public hearing. And we can turn it over for further discussion. I will also entertain a motion.
Oh, I'm not ready for a motion.
Okay.
I just want to say, with the poll, I think, to the developer's point, it'd be one thing if this was, multi-acres and, much larger scale of a project, but it's a half an acre, and it's pretty costly to do that, plus, to Mr. Tilley's point, it's, may open up a can of worms and start many other problems that really don't have anything to do with their project or,
Yes,
so I am not really in favor of them having to underground that.
Well, and I want to address one of your concerns. I mean, one thing that I think about, so I am generally in accordance with what Commissioner Castillo and Commissioner Lepore have said. And one thing that is unique is that as we're a young city, right? And so we continue to deal with this transition of being from an unincorporated county area to a city on its own. And so as we have areas that are being developed, which even if they're, the kind of previously undeveloped areas, not necessarily infill, it's, I think, an easier request. There aren't existing sidewalks in many cases and things like that. So that's something I do struggle with. So I agree, whether it's an official policy or just a precedent that we have set, I do think that we need to have the expectation that development proposals include undergrounding of utilities, because I think that's going to get us to kind of a more modern, more usable kind of public right-of-way and walkability and bikeability issues. But this is right in that gray area for me. And if I have to lean on one direction or the other, I lean towards not overburdening an infill project. So that's kind of where I stand. Does staff have
Madam
something
Chair,
to share?
I have a suggestion, if you are
great.
ready to hear.
Thank you.
How about we consider something like, if the city engineer determines it is feasible to do so, the applicant shall underground or relocate the utility pole on the corner of 5th and G.
Do we need to put any time on that? And I'm asking both Commissioner Liebig and city attorneys for them to weigh in on concerns about at what time in the process that needs to happen. Oh, and I think I have staff approaching.
I would just like to ask that if, looking at the pictures there, it looks like the pole's right in the middle of the curb return right now. And what we don't want to do is have them go in, because we don't have a specific requirement to do so, and build new improvements and leave that and not allow for, meeting minimum ADA requirements and clearance widths and that sort of thing. So if there isn't a feasible location to put the pole, like maybe scoot it over into the planter strip, then I think, and there's no setbacks, I think the only alternative is to underground it. But, maybe just a little muscle there so that it's clear that the pole can't stay if it's blocking ADA access. That'd be appreciated.
Duly noted. Is the city attorney going to work on addressing that in a revised?
Mark,
COP?
are you asking that it say something like, if the city engineer determines it is feasible to do so or necessary in order to ensure compliance with the ADA? Okay.
I have a question. Do we need to have a condition that states that, though, if staff can work it out with the developer, as Mr. Tilley was suggesting? I'm just curious.
I think we would prefer to have the language as drafted by Mr. City Attorney.
I would be comfortable with that. If the applicant is comfortable with that, I see thumbs up.
Okay, so the condition would read, if the city engineer determines it is feasible to do so or necessary in order to ensure compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the applicant shall underground or relocate the utility pole located on the corner of 5th and G.
Thank you. So just to clarify, there is a draft additional condition that was read by city attorney. There's also one from the memo from staff referencing the arborist report.
We would ask that both be included in any motion.
Condition.
I'd be comfortable with that too, Chair Austin, underground or relocate.
Okay. Okay, I will move the recommended action with the addition of the condition as read by city staff regarding the undergrounding of utilities, as well as the condition regarding the arborist report.
Second?
I have a motion from Commissioner Liebig and a second from Commissioner Castillo. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to the city clerk by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 10 days of tonight's action, and the appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 6, public hearing regarding proposed Newport Villas vesting tentative subdivision map 4492 at 2555 Stonegate Drive. Ms. Allen, welcome back.
This project is a tentative subdivision map application for the creation of 36 residential lots, 1 pedestrian access lot, and 1 landscape entry lot on a 4.6 acre parcel. The average parcel size for these lots is approximately 3,450 square feet, which comes out to a project density of about 7.4 units per acre, which is at the lower end of the R2 density range, which goes from 6.1 units to the acre to 12 units to the acre. The project is located on the northeast corner of Stonegate Drive and Lake Washington Boulevard. The project will be accessed from a newly created street on the eastern side of Stonegate Drive. Frontage improvements, including curbs, gutter, sidewalk, and bike lanes, will be constructed along the eastern side of Stonegate for the project. Staff is recommending approval of the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The project applicant is here, and I believe he has a presentation for you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Allen. Does the applicant, would the applicant like to provide a presentation? Great, I will open the public hearing, and please be sure to introduce yourself.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Dick Sestero. I'm with CCON. I don't really have a presentation. I had some exhibits. I know there used to be a table here that would project on the screen, so I won't be able to do that. But in any event, this is we've been developing the
One
Newport.
moment, clerk, do we have any, if you have materials, maybe she can help you project it? Do we have?
We don't have it.
Oh.
I don't.
Mic was off.
We did test that, and we were having issues.
Oh,
just
okay.
waiting,
Well, thank you very much for
unfortunately.
trying.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Kathy, I don't know if you have any other plans that you can put up on the screen? It's not essential. It's a pretty simple site. I don't know if you are.
Much of that was included in your packet,
We have
your
it- we have
color
attachments that-
elevations and things.
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
site plan. In any event, we've been developing the Newport Estates project for about the last, actually 20 years. I think the tentative map was originally approved 20 years ago. But this site was not mapped originally because it was thought to be an apartment site. And then as time's gone on, we've agreed that single-family housing makes more sense there. It's surrounded by other single-family homes. So we're proposing to do this project, which is a 36-lot subdivision, single-family homes. I think it's important that we're widening Stonegate Drive, and we're also completing a sidewalk from the north, which has been a real concern about residents to the north. And then we're also extending the bike lanes, so those will be completed in the area. We'll be putting masonry walls along both frontages on Stonegate and completing the wall that's along Lake Washington. The homes we're proposing, there are 3 different models, and each model has 3 different elevations. So it's basically like 9 different looks of homes on the 36 lots. So it's a pretty good variety, I think. And I think you may have some pictures of the homes in the packages you got. And those are really the main things, unless you have some questions. By the way, the roofs will have tiled roofs, stucco, rock details on the houses. So they're really good-looking elevations that we've actually been building in a few other areas. So they prove to be very, very desirable. And I don't know if you've seen, we have the Newport Meadows project, which is under construction out by the big oak grove, and so you can see the type of homes we build and the quality, which I think should be very, very good. The homes will range from about 2,400 square feet to about 2,800 square feet. And other than that, I don't think, unless you have any questions, we're in agreement with the conditions of approval, and we'd love to get this project going in the spring. So we appreciate your approval. And like I said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. And if any questions are raised by any other speakers, I'd like the chance maybe to respond to those.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your comments. You can have a seat, and there actually is a good, you might want to sit in the front. There might be a good chance that commissioners have questions for you. Thank you so much.
All right.
So I will start with questions for staff or the applicant from Commissioner Liebig.
You'll appreciate this. I don't have any comments or questions.
I'm going to fall out of my chair. Commissioner Vu.
No comments or questions yet.
Thank you. Commissioner Castillo.
I just had just one clarification on, we did receive a comment from a resident nearby. Comment number 3, I know it says does not reference flood impact fees. Flood impact fees collected from the project should be used for levee improvements. Just a quick question, the homes near that area, do we collect flood impact fees, and are they allocated to levee improvements?
Yeah, we do collect flood in lieu fees that help go toward the flood program. That is different from drainage. And so there's actually 2 separate impact fees in that regard. So I believe they are allocated by per city policy as we stated in the memo, but those are 2 separate things.
And those 2 are part of this particular project?
Yeah, and those apply citywide.
Okay. I just needed some clarification on that. And there were also comments on traffic analysis, but I saw staff's comments as it relates to traffic impacts. They were analyzed during completion of the general plans, 2035 ER, so I'm good with that.
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioner Lepore.
I just had a question on price range. Well, do you have that? Sorry, price range, have you determined?
At this point, I don't think we really have prices set. We like to keep them as low as we can make them until we get really into the full construction cost of the project. Normally, we're not setting them at this point. But we're going to, try to make them as affordable as we can. And then we also have a condition to have an affordable housing agreement. So I'm not sure how we'll handle that yet, but that is a consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I do have some questions, and I will be the toughest on this project so far of all my commissioners. So this site was originally contemplated to have much greater density, really contemplated to be an apartment level density, and I am troubled that we don't have that. I am troubled that this is more of what this development area has. That being said, I'm familiar with this product, and it's very high quality, and people love living there, and it's really in high demand. So clearly, there's a demand in this area for the type of product that you're proposing. But that being said, I am interested in our community, particularly Southport, having a lot of opportunities at different price points to attract different family types at a variety of income levels. And so I am troubled that this is not going to be higher density and therefore likely a little more affordable, at least by design. And two things that will get me comfortable with that are staff hearing me when I say that the lands that are fronting Jefferson, I would really like to see, if they aren't used for commercial, at least mixed use, or at the very least dense residential. I'm really hoping to get some more dense residential in Southport. And also, so that's one thing that would get me comfortable with this proposal. Another thing that would get me comfortable with this proposal is if we didn't necessarily do the inclusionary impact fees, but really creating a home or more based on what our policies are, to create some affordable home ownership opportunities. So those are two things that really help me get comfortable with this proposal. So that's one thing, is the density. The other thing that does bother me is I do think that some of there's only 2 comments, but I also recognize that this is the main thoroughfare to this neighborhood's elementary school, and I think it's worth noting that that during the school hours, I'm more concerned in the morning, I'm less concerned in the afternoon, because you don't have a lot of in and out residential traffic when school gets out. But I do foresee an issue of potential safety issues during kind of the morning commute / school drop-off time. Stonegate is pretty busy, so I won't suggest a condition of approval, but I do want to give the applicant a heads up that there may be some other accommodations that we will need to make if there are issues after the project is built. I could see there being, something hourly, something similar to what we see on Linden, where there is an impact to the to the school district, to the residential community around the schools during those hours, just because it's so close to that main intersection at Lake Washington and Stonegate. That being said, I am so excited about this corner being developed. I think it's a tough area as far as active transportation goes. Having incomplete sidewalks and no bike lane there is personally very troubling for me. So I'm very excited that that's part of the conditions, that we're going to get some improvement to the active transportation at this really critical intersection. So those are my comments. And that was cute. Yes, Commissioner Liebig.
I just want to follow up. I want to echo Madam Chair's comments on that. That was my one hesitation with the project, is that we're decreasing density.
Yeah.
The city has specific density goals, and we've got to meet them. And every time we do reduce them, we're going to have to make it up somewhere else. And, we did just approve a prior project that was higher density, but it actually wasn't as high as it could have been. And so that is a concern of mine, and I just want to, I don't need a response. I just wanted to echo Bernadette's comments on that. The other thing on the traffic, I'm sorry, I saw this, but as maybe I'm seeing it wrong. Is it a right in, right out only?
No.
It's not.
No.
I am reading it wrong.
Yeah, and that was one, and then I thought, well, do I want to put that in condition of approval as right in, right out? That means they would have to drive all the way around to go to the grocery store. So that's just from a really practical standpoint, people are going to break those rules, so.
I gotcha. Okay. It's 36 houses? 36 houses. Yeah, I wasn't as worried about the traffic impact, I guess. So,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So I don't have any additional comments, so I will close the public hearing, but I will allow some additional comments or discussion from my fellow commissioners. Then I'll ask a question of staff. Could you describe what the affordable housing requirements are going to be for this type of development?
We would anticipate they would likely pay the in lieu fee, which goes into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. and we use those funds to leverage with other funds to actually produce units, wherever we can in our city. In our old policy, we used to require, even in a for sale project such as this, to actually provide low and moderate units in a for sale situation, and is a laudable goal, but in the real world proved to be very challenging to do and to even keep those units long term. So under this paradigm, we believe we can actually even produce more affordable units overall by using this type of funds, and similar to the prior project where we leveraged those with other funds. And as I'm sure as a commission is aware, doing affordable housing has always been difficult, and it's even more difficult in this post redevelopment era. So this has been the paradigm, the way the council has amended the affordable housing ordinance. And so I would definitely anticipate this one paying into that fund.
And even with that information, and Mr. Tilley, I know that you know that I feel the same way. I actually very much am on the same page as you on that. The one issue is in this particular neighborhood, we don't have, I can't think of any apartment buildings off the top of my head. Density, yes, there's some condominiums, but there's not a lot in this particular neighborhood that fits that type of description. So that's one of the reasons in this particular area, I'd love to see, even if it's just one or two, even if it's just one, probably given the size, homeownership opportunity. I'd love for the applicant to endeavor to do that. So those are my 2 cents, not going to make any requirements.
You need a motion.
And I will entertain a motion, yes.
For a motion? I'll move the recommended action.
Second.
Let's see, I have a motion from Commissioner Liebig, and I'm going to give the second to Commissioner Vu on this one. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries.
Any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission in this matter to the City Council by filing a written appeal with the city clerk within 10 days of tonight's action, and that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
Thank you very much. Moving on to informal discussion.
If I may have a
Yes.
moment, Chair Austin, just on behalf of myself and my staff and our city attorney, would like to thank you all for your service this year. This will be our last meeting for 2017. I feel like we've had a pretty full year. We've had some, fairly heavy-duty projects and policy matters come before us, and we've got through them. So I'm grateful for the contributions that you've made each individually and as a group, and we're looking forward to another good year next year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tilley. Speaking on my behalf, the feeling is mutual. Actually, I do have 2 informal discussion. Don't worry, you don't need to take notes or anything. Staff, yes. Commissioners, probably not. Washington specific plan, I think it was the last meeting, I said I'd love to hear in the new year, hopefully when we have as full a commission as possible, about some of our parking and active transportation plans. Washington specific plan is something else I'd like to revisit. That can be later on in the spring, but there's just so many moving parts, and tonight was a great highlight of a couple of those. So I think that we need to revisit that, and that may be good as an informational item as well as a discussion item, particularly if we have some new commissioners. So that's one piece. And then sized plans. So I know that Vice Chair Sternfels gets his applications digitally, but I also recognize, A, it's a lot of paper, and B, it's actually quite expensive for applicants to be providing full size. Speaking for myself, and I allow my fellow commissioners weigh in, I don't think that we need full, I would say that we don't need full copies for all commissioners. I would recommend either at the very minimum, like quarter sized, and or just if the commission has questions, we can request, we can request PDFs, they're available online, but I would like to say we don't need full size. I think it's pretty excessive, it's expensive for them, and it's kind of onerous for us, but if people feel differently, please feel free to comment.
I would have to agree. with the one caveat of master plan development and large things like, say, the Bridge District, when we're going after something of that scale, those big documents can be helpful. So with the caveat of that,
Each
I prefer the
project
small
applicant.
ones as well.
Yeah, we have tried to get away from giving you the big giant plans, every single time. So to the extent the smaller ones, such as what you had on this last project, to the extent those work and are, easily readable, we're more than happy to continue to do that. And if anyone wishes to go full in like Vice Chair Sternfels has done, we're happy to that, whatever works for you.
So seeing other comment, I think you can let applicants know if it's a project level, we don't need full, what's included in the 8x11 application is probably sufficient. And that's it for formal discussion for me. Any other comments? Take a motion to adjourn? So moved, we are adjourned.